I'm Laura Hampton. I grew up sailing at Down Yacht Club in Strangford Lough, Northern Ireland, and I recently finished a circumnavigation as first mate for the Clipper race.
So Laura, we're up here in a very blustery but otherwise beautiful Port Rush.
Yeah.
How are things?
Really good, yeah. I just got back from San Francisco this week, so it's been really awesome to be back here. It's one of my favourite places in the world. So.
I've managed to pin you down for just about a week in the midst of all your travels around the world, and I'm sure we'll get on to that in a second. But first of all, just tell me how you got into sailing. What was your sort of journey through the sport, and why did you get into sailing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I carved a pretty unorthodox route. So when I was 10, I started sailing at Down Yacht Club in Northern Ireland. I went out on an Optimist, swiftly ran it aground. The coach headed on out, and I was kind of left to my own devices. And I think at that point I was like, okay, I guess if I pull this and move that, I can go. And I managed to get myself out of there. And I think at that point, well, I didn't realize it then, but like that feeling of freedom at 10 years old was so special and something you don't have in any other facet at that age. And yeah, I think I fell in love with it then, and it grew bigger and bigger, and was lucky to get a lot of great support to kind of be where I am now. But
you've said to me though in the past that you were never really kind of a racer growing up.
Yeah.
But now you do it as a career.
Yeah.
How that sort of sometimes seems a little bit sort of almost paradoxical. How did that come about?
Yes, I think I'd always wanted to have more involvement in racing as a kid. It just wasn't really always an option. I did sort of some of the local races, but wasn't in squads or any of those kind of national teams. And I think for me then, what happened was I put myself in spaces where I could get access, and a lot of that came through an organisation called the Sea Cadets and doing tall ships races with them and small ships races. And I almost then went sort of in this roundabout way of going from dinghies to sort of big tall ships in that world, and then I came back down to keelboats and keelboat racing and ended up having a career in it. But like, if you'd asked me as a kid that this would be my career, I would never have anticipated it, and never thought I was A, at the level, or B, would have the kind of access or the opportunities to do this.
You talk about access and opportunities. One of the biggest opportunities, which you definitely grabbed with both hands, was the Clipper race. Why the Clipper race?
So the Clipper race came about for me, it was the summer in my last year of university, and I got involved in a programme which was actually going to take people for one leg of the race. And then when I was on it, at the end of it, I was lucky to get a really great mentor, and she said, look, I'd love to take you around the world. I said, that's incredible, but I can't afford it because it's a pay mechanism. And she said, no, I think you should come as staff, as one of the professionals. And she basically set out a kind of a to-do list, and if I fulfilled that, she said, look, come back and we'll see where you are then. And I guess for me that was a real clicking point of, okay, this is an option. And I'd done ocean crossings and a lot more racing at that point, so I was already much further up the ladder than I was when I was younger. But to have that mentor and that helping hand in was incredible. And so I applied and trialed. They do a really rigorous application and trialing process, and was really fortunate to be selected and to start the same day that my dissertation was due at St Andrews. So really lucky that like all of the timings came into place.
If I was selected just as my dissertation was starting, I think I'd definitely drop the dissertation, but yeah. Perhaps that's the difference between you and I. But ocean racing, it is a completely different thing. You know, you've got waves the size of multi-story buildings.
Yeah.
You're at times thousands of miles from land.
Yeah.
Have there been any moments where you think, oh my goodness, yes, I had this opportunity to do the Clipper race, but I'm sort of having regrets now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's something that's so ingrained. I mean, you can see right now, like, I've had this respect for the ocean since I was a kid, and I think in that respect there is a massive element of fear as well. And I think a lot of what I do on the water, and you'll know all about this, it's like you're always managing that respect and that fear that you're being safe on the water. And I think for me, when it comes to ocean crossings and the Clipper race, that's a huge part of it, especially, you know, when we're in the North Pacific and the Southern Ocean. The closest human life to us is the space station.
Bonkers thought that,
which
isn't it?
Is like this terrifying idea, especially like I was responsible not only for the boat, but for those lives and those humans in such a remote, you know, it's Earth's most remote wilderness. I don't think at any point in your life you feel ready for that responsibility. I mean, I was really young. I was 22 when I started the job, so I was really young, but I was really fortunate to be supported really well by the company and the people around me, and yeah, we did it really successfully, which is always a nice boost.
What was probably your most touch and go moment while you've been ocean racing?
Yeah, I think we had a pretty gnarly night Christmas Eve last year. So I was due to go off watch and I'd just gone down below, and it had been a really tough night with trying to keep the boat under control and helming and driving the right way. And so when I came down, I felt the boat just roll slightly. You become really in tune to how the boat moves when you live on it every day. And I knew that roll was not a good one, and immediately I shot back up. Skipper woke up, I was up, and it was a whole team effort of just trying to get hold of that sail, and I had to go up the rig, which is 90 feet up in the air, in that moment, in that pitch black, like 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. And it was definitely an unusual Christmas present, but like the teamwork, and I can share some of the footage with you of us just like all sort of 20 of our crew grasping at this sail and working together to get it down. And that's what the race is all about. It's this delving into the power of humans to work together in some of the hardest environments, and to see that and be part of that is a real privilege.
A lot of women and girls might look at this and look at you as a bit of an inspiration, doing something which, like as you said, might seem out of a lot of people's heads when they're growing up. How important to you are role models within the sport of sailing?
Yeah.
And did you have any role models growing up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think role models are super important. I've always looked at it as kind of a three-way setup, so I always think there should be someone who's kind of above you and has done what you've done before and leads the way and kind of pulls you along. I think you should also have someone who's beside you that you can relate to and grow with. And then I think to add to that, you then have to be reaching down to kind of pull up that next generation. I think that's what's so important for us in everyday life and in the sport of sailing massively.
One of the things which we're really big at RYA Northern Ireland is the Women on Water programme.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is for girls more locally and who are applying their sailing in a much more local sense?
Yeah. Women on Water is a great programme. They actually recently did it at East Down, which I saw the footage from, which is awesome. And I think there's something really special about setting up an environment that someone can come into and feel safe with their questions and feel they can learn. One of the big things for me is that culture of making people feel welcome, invited, and also giving them the opportunity to fail in that environment. I think it's so high pressured, especially if you hop onto a race boat or your first time sailing. You don't want to make a mistake, but the reality is the only way we can learn is by making those mistakes. Creating spaces like that through things like Women in Water is so important.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting about creating that environment where you can fail.
Yeah.
If you could kind of have your sailing journey up to now, I hope the sailing journey's not over, but if you could do one thing again and maybe change it or have a failure and make a change, what would that be?
I think when I look back on my sailing journey, it's gone in a direction I never thought it would have. And I think had I have realised that potential or these options were a thing when I was younger, then I could have pursued it more. I think for so long I had my sights set on a career in the Foreign Office and International Development, and that was kind of what took centrepiece for me throughout my kind of younger years. And this was a hobby that I then realised could become a career, and not only a career that I love, but something that I'm passionate about, and there's so much room to develop it. So yeah, I think if I could look back and realise in those younger years that what I was doing wasn't just a hobby, but there was so much value in it for what would happen later, that would be an incredible mindset to have at that age.
Well, thanks very much, Laura. I think we'll maybe catch up in about 5 years' time when you've done another lap of the world.
We'll see.
But yeah, really appreciate it. Cheers.
Great, thanks, Pete.